Welcome back to Stay Tuned, supporting transition-aged youth. This podcast is brought to you by the Transitions to Adulthood Center for Research at UMass Chan Medical School, Department of Psychiatry, and in partnership with our research sponsor, the National Institute for Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation. I'm your host, May, and today we have a special guest on. Their name is Ty Smith. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, feel free.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ty. I legally changed my middle name to Erd, so I have a license to be tired. You can also tell I walk the tie-dye.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you on. And today we're going to talk a little bit about your background and what led you to the work you currently do today. So please feel free to go ahead and share your story, however you would like that to look like.
Okay. Well, my life is an open book. I freely share anything that might help another person. I like to hope that my story can help other people guide their paths. I know what works for me won't work for everyone, but maybe illuminating some of the hurdles and difficulties can help. And feel free to ask me any questions. I'm happy to share whatever I can that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I think when we had talked, you had discussed a little bit about your lived experience and what that has looked like for you and what recovery has looked like for you. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, I think would be a great place to start. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your mental health journey has looked like.
So I first and foremost identify as a peer, a person with a disability and lived experience. I grew up in the mental health system. My first experience really was in third grade when I wasn't fitting in very well, and my teacher would get mad at me because I was playing with my pencil, then take away all my pencil and yell at me for not doing my work. The school was under observation and didn't want to test me. So eventually my mom pulled me out of that school and took me to Children's Hospital to get it screened. And I received my first diagnosis of sensory integrative disorder. The treatment for that at the time was taking a surgical sponge with very stiff bristles and rubbing it all over the body as hard and fast as I could in the hopes to create new neural pathways. My reaction was less than ideal. I lost my temper, and that makes sense. That it was really torturous. I lost my temper, and I got my second diagnosis of anger management disorder. After that, I was put on medication, and I pretty much lived in residential treatment facilities. I went to schools and contained classrooms, and the only socialization I was allowed to do was at like groups. Until I was 18 years old, I wasn't allowed to have a friend. The liability reasons, they didn't want, and no one wanted to risk me and that person getting into a fight outside of their control. So I really was not allowed to have a friend until I was 18 years old. It was very, very difficult. I got a really bad education because I was in behavioral programs. My education was really bad. I think I learned more from television than I did from school. Eventually, graduated high school just barely. I dropped out for 2 years. I was depressed for a couple weeks and didn't go to school. And then I was too afraid to go back. I didn't know what to tell people why I was gone. And so I dropped out and barely graduated at the age of 21. The teacher was able to use some of my work experience to make up for the credits that I needed and had a GPA of 4.0, but did not have a good education. When I went to college, I had to take a lot of basic classes, math, 030, and really all the classes. I would always excel at math. I would finish all my work in 5 minutes and then sit at school with nothing to do for hours, reading the same newspaper over and over again. Eventually, they took pity on me and let me bring a device and to watch anime. This was before iPods were really big, so I was ahead of my game there. I had a difficult system experience. And it's one of the reasons why I'm a huge advocate now. They didn't give me a chance to fail. I was denied a lot of rite of passages. As an adult, I struggle with a lot of the things that I struggle with are basic skills that I never got a chance to learn that I'm expected to know. I do a lot of advocating and a lot of work in the independent living community. And I share my story in the hopes that we could do better and make the system better. My providers had no faith in me. They thought I was going to spend the rest of my life behind bars and told my mom to relinquish all custody to state that there was no hope. They thought I'd better off as a ward of a state than put any trust in me into where I am now. And what a mistake they made, because here I am. I'm a high-level policymaker. I'm a commissioner. I do a lot of work for my state's governor and mayor, work a full-time job. I'm now even a proud homeowner and taxpayer. And, I've accomplished what is very hard to do because the systems don't always give us the chance to do it. And I could go into more details, but I think that's a good basic starting point.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ty, for sharing your story of absolute resilience. It is quite the comeback story. And I just thank you again for your vulnerability today. Your story speaks to the stigma and misconceptions that we people with lived experience in mental health conditions face on a day-to-day basis. And so thank you for highlighting your story and sharing a story of hope as well. You've accomplished so much in your career. You have a lot of things to be proud of, and it is incredible that you're open to sharing it all as well. Thank you. Taking us back to college and undergrad, I know that in our previous conversation, you had shared that you were actually able to help design your own bachelor's degree program. Uh,
Mhm.
could you share more about that and what that was like for you? Feeling like your education was not quite as good as what was necessary when you entered college. So, yeah, would love to hear just more about what that was like for you and how you came to design your own major and carve your own path.
Okay. Well, I think before going there, I should say that I volunteered and worked for a very long time, thinking that it was going to help me in college. I thought if I did all these things, I could use it towards credit. And when I went to my associate's degree, absolutely not. But eventually, when I was working with my school for my bachelor's, they let me apply a lot of my credit. I think one of the biggest things if you want to work in the nonprofit arena, the human services networking is like one of the best things you can learn. And I had already done that for a very, very long time. And so a lot of the things that people do to start off in this field, they felt like I was adequately had the skills, expertise, and the connections to not need those things. So I worked with them. I was also working with my state's division of voc rehab, DVR, and I wanted to do degree in nonprofit management. My dream is to eventually open up a peer-run respite. I was really envious of all the people doing high-risk youth studies because high-risk youth is also one of my passions. And the certification for that is almost identical to nonprofit management. They're in the same field. And so I worked with my school and said, I'd really like that, and they let me test out of some of my classes. It helped me do an individualized degree plan where I tested out of some of my classes and then created my own degree that combined high risk youth and nonprofit management. So I have a degree in, believe it or not, high risk youth nonprofit management and administration. So I got a certificate in both, and I'm very happy about that because while I don't identify as a youth anymore, it is a community I very much care about and want to make sure that we give the torch that to them and give them the opportunity to build whatever we want in the future. And we need their guidance and expertise for that. So my dream job, as I said, to run a peer run respite. And eventually I'd like to focus with youth on that, to be one of the first in the nation to have a truly peer run yet respite for youth. They have a few ones that kind of skirt it, but liability prevents us from doing what's right a lot of times.
Yeah, and that's really cool that they let you combine your two passions. And for those who may not know, would you mind explaining what high risk youth are?
For the purpose of learning in school, it was a youth in the behavioral health system. I like to work more of in communities. I think if you want to have impact in any one area, you need expertise in all areas. And so if you want to make something for the behavioral health community, which is, you know, really one of my expertise and the system that I'm from originally, you need expertise in all areas because, like, the foster community system is heavily impacted by behavioral health systems. Homeless community and LGBTQ, I used to know it as LGBTQIT2S community, they're all impacted. And that some of those are communities, not systems. And so if we want to have good change, we need to have all voices at the table. So for me, high risk youth is just people who need a little bit more support and self-identify that way. But I wouldn't be so eliminating that they need a diagnosis or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a helpful definition, I think, and helpful from your perspective, most importantly. I also definitely agree. I mean, there's so much overlap and intersectionality, and one thing affects another thing. It's not just cut and dry. I guess I'm I wanted to ask about what it was like for you actually while you were in school, completing your degree, going to classes, taking exams, all the things that students need to manage. What was it like for you to move through your college career with a mental health conditions and all sorts of other life challenges? Because of course, mental health is not just it's not a straight shot to recovery. There's ups and downs. I certainly know it's tough. You take one step forward, two steps back, three steps forward,
Mm.
10 steps back sometimes, and it's not so cut and dry. So I would love to know how you coped with it and what your experience was like.
I had to start off knowing what my tolerance was. I could not really handle more than two classes at a time, which meant I was a half-time student. I like to describe my energy in three levels. One is physical energy, the endurance or fortitude to do something before you're physically tired. Emotional energy, which is when you're feeling really, really depressed, you only have enough energy to do a few things at a time before you just can't do anything. And then mental energy, and that's just when you become so overwhelmed. Burnout would be like the best way of describing it. And it's really those three energies. And when you run out of one, you can tap into the other ones, but are quickly depleted. So if you run out of physical energy, sometimes you can will yourself and fight yourself to continue to go, but you will have to stop eventually. And so that I had to put on restrictions. Plus, I do a lot of volunteer work. And while I was in school, I had more volunteer work to do. And then I also had a few other considerations. There was a couple times in school where I started a class and I couldn't do it. I am the type that strives for straight A's. I have one B that I'm very proud of, and that was in ASL. But there's a few classes that I had to withdraw from because the teachers had demands that I couldn't meet. I'll give you an example. I had a philosophy teacher. I really love philosophy, but he demanded perfection when it comes to writing. And I would access all the resources I could. I would take it to the writing center and get it checked out. But writing is one of those things that you could write perfectly, but someone else could see it as wrong. It's an interpretation. And so when I got a less than optimal grade on something that I put a lot of effort in, I had to walk away because I just couldn't give him anything greater. And it was devastating for me to give him something and have it rejected in that sense. I couldn't do that. And then one time signed up for a chemistry class, really interested in chemistry. They were talking and having us sign waivers like, you might hurt someone, you might hurt yourself. And I don't care if I get hurt, but it would devastate me. It would emotionally wreck me if I hurt someone else. I was too afraid of that to continue with that class. One semester, I was forced to move abruptly. I had to request that entire semester not count because of the move, and I was very, very stressed. I know moving is one of the hardest things that you can do. It's particularly hard for me and my family, so I needed to pull back and keep good awareness of my mental health levels and what I can and cannot do. there were some things that I accessed to get supports. I had a lot of supports at our school's access center. I think most schools have accommodations or access centers. They're great for if you have a disability. Usually they provide a lot of more obvious things like books on tape if you have a learning disability like I did. But I also had an advocate there. Every time I would start a new class after the philosophy teacher, I would request that one of my accommodations was to meet with my teacher, with the access person, and get to know them and have them get to know me to see if I would do good in their class or not. And most of my teachers loved me because I'm dedicated, I'm a hard worker, and I want to give my very best. I've had some teachers that absolutely hated me for those things and thought I was teaching the class. Not my fault that in my deviant studies of youth class, I had roughly 30 years of experience where the teacher had 5. You know, I was a little troublemaker when I was a kid, and I was surrounded by other troublemakers.
Well, I think it's also important to note that lived experience is also valid as well. And maybe, maybe that teacher had formal training in via like a school, but there's only so much you can learn. And there's a lot that actually experience can bring knowledge base. So I think it's worthwhile pointing that out too.
Like to in the future go into some of the classes that work with students with mental health conditions and do a class in education on how to engage people better and what you should know about our histories because it was my experience while going through a lot of these classes that they teach away a lot of lived experience that you shouldn't connect or relate. There's too many things that could go wrong. But I've always noticed that the best providers I've ever had are the ones that identified as being human.
Yes. I think that's why peer support is also so important as well because it's emphasized that we have maybe we haven't been through the same exact thing, but I can certainly relate to and my experiences are at the center of how I help others. And I know you touched on the Access Center as being a large factor in being a large factor in helping you cope through school. But were there any other mindsets or tips and tricks or coping skills that you feel helped you throughout your time in school as well?
I had a lot of support and a lot of advocates. I know I haven't got here on my own merits alone that I needed support. I have a really good mental health provider. They are unique, I think, in the world because they have a dual board of directors. One board of directors, a typical 501(c)(3) board, and then one board made up of peers, just the people that they serve in the community. And both boards have an equal say in how the organization is run. I believe treatment is very similar to that, where I am a subject matter expert in myself. There's not a person in this world that knows me better than me, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, how my body's reacting, all that. That is my expertise. Generally, providers have expertise that I don't. Like I said, I've been in the system for a long time and I have a lot of knowledge, but I don't know everything. And they might know of cutting edge treatments, medication, or things that I don't. And when we can come together as partners where they're offering their expertise and I'm offering my insight, that's where my treatment can be the best. And so I had good advocates and good treatment. I had a really good DVR caseworker that supported me. I'm on our state's website as a success story. I also work with a lot of consumers that are very frustrated with DVR. It really can be difficult if you don't have a good advocate. But I had a good advocate. I had good people. I had my family there for me too. And when I was struggling, I had a lot of safeguards. There were some things that kind of went too far, though, like the school, when I resigned from one of my classes because I was scared I could hurt someone, the school was somehow notified about that. And they followed up with the school had it was a shared campus and they had a campus police officers that gave me a call. And that was a little alarming and scary to be called by police asking me if I'm okay or if I'm going to hurt anyone. I'm like, you didn't understand what I was trying to say or what I wanted. And to be honest, for you to call me like that is terrifying. I didn't like that. I understand that we want to protect people, but we need to give people a chance to fail, a chance to make mistakes, a chance to grow. And a lot of times when we do forced treatment, I believe it's a failure of the system that there's a time where we could have done better, but didn't know what to do and resorted into forced treatment, which can be quite harmful.
Absolutely, yeah. I've known people who have had that a very similar situation happen to them where they even show up at their door, the police show up at their door to do a wellness check on it is terrifying, and there are definitely better solutions than what is currently in place. And I think for me, what it sounds like is it was a total misunderstanding. And had they cared enough to just really talk to you and fully understand what you really meant when you said you were afraid to hurt people due to that class, the whole thing could have been avoided. But of course, you know, it was a fail
Mhm.
on their part. Moving on, I know you've talked a little bit about what you do currently, but how do you use your background in what you do today for a living? And I guess you also do volunteer and advocacy work. So not just a living, but all of it. What are you up to today? And how does your background play into that?
So my first job, my mom was telling me about this high paid job as a peer specialist. Now, if anyone is a peer specialist, the first thing they know is it's not a high paying job. But I loved it. I found a passion. I was one of the first in the nations to be a YAP, a young adult peer specialist. I was 17 when I got my training and I had to wait a whole year to do it because I had to get a background check. But when I started, I just loved it. And it was during a time where I didn't know who I was working for. And whenever I went to a policy meeting or some sort of meeting, I would ask, okay, who am I representing? Who am I working for? Am I, if the youth want something in their parents, who do I go with? Who do I fight for? And people couldn't answer me back then. They're like, yeah, and couldn't give me a straight answer. That led me into the policy world. Quickly became the chair of the Youth and Young Adults Transitions Committee, which was a small committee of our state's block grant. That led me into some other things. One of, I think, my biggest accomplishments or things that I was part of is I helped another appointed council that I was on work on our high-end utilizer report, which was at the time the 20% of the behavioral health community that used around 80% of the resources. I still use that report to my advocacy because it changed my world. And I believe in quality of life that, if people are happier, they're healthier. And if we could not like forcibly make people happy, but if we could improve their lives, give them a reason to be happy and the supports that they need, then we could save a lot of money. I joke when I say this, but it's the truth. Medicare would save a fortune if they invested in Match.com. There are so many people out there, who are alone that have been disowned by their friends and their families, and they had no connections except their providers. And they when their providers are not working on a Friday night and they had no one until Monday morning, they freak out and they start coping in extreme ways, drinking, self-harm, using substances, and then they wind up in the ER, which is very costly and expensive. How much money could we save if they just had a friend? So I use it a lot in my work. Got my first full-time job about 3 years ago as a independent living specialist for a Center for Independent Living. Wonderful things. Centers for Independent Living, every state should have a couple. Our state has 9 and covers every county in our state, but they are like the best kept secret. They help people with any disability with anything around independent living. So we help with housing, accessing benefits, benefits planning, which is what I'll talk about next. Skills, I hate life skills, but things like that. Socialization, anything that they need, we help with. And if we're not the experts and can answer the questions yourself, we'll work with you to find the experts and not just give you a handoff. We'll work with you until your goals are met. They're just wonderful resources, wonderful programs. I love working with these communities. They believe in community integration, that people have right to be in a community of their choice. They believe in dignity of risk, that chance to fail is a chance to grow. Do a lot of the advocacy for the community, but it's not just the people marching on the ground. Our leaders are marching with them. We're getting arrested together. And one of us gets arrested, we fight all to be arrested, not just single people out. I work for a SIL and I am now a benefits planner. Benefits planning is another amazing thing, and why I reached out to RTC. I used to review documentation. I used to be a part of your youth advisory groups, and I really believe in the work that you're doing. And I wanted to make sure that you're promoting us because we do some wonderful things. But benefits planning is anyone with a disability who are receiving a benefits like Social Security income, SSDI, housing assistance, food stamps, SNAP, LEAP, any sort of benefit. You can come to a benefits planner. There are multiple ways to do it, and we'll calculate how much money, if you're interested in working or are working, we'll calculate how much money you can make before losing the benefits that matter to you and help you maximize your income. There are a lot of exclusions and incentives and subsidies that you can get, particularly for youth. There's the student income exclusion, but I think it's up to roughly around $9,000 a year, around $2,000 a month. So if you have a summer job for a couple of months, you could earn like $9,000 in those 3 months. It wouldn't count against your benefits. So you'd have an extra $9,000 in your pocket or your family's pocket. So great programs out there that people don't know about, and we do. And so we can help you access them and help you count your subsidies and report your income. And so you can maximize everything that you get. And it's a win because in the long run, we're getting you off some of these benefits or lowering the amount of benefits that you use. But it's a win for you because you get more money in the long run, always. And then it's a win for the taxpayers because the taxpayers help you get off these benefits. And for me, I mean, I didn't want to sit on a couch collecting Social Security, just playing video games. I want to be out there working, helping. I know a lot of other people do, and this gave me the chance to do it.
Yeah. Wow. I learned so much just now. So thank you. Definitely taking a lot of that good information with me today. I think back to your point about living a meaningful life, not just taking the bare bones of life, but really what will make you happy? What else is there out there that will really fill your cup? It's not just about getting your basic survival needs met. Everyone deserves to live a life they are proud and happy and to live. And I love it was something about taking risks because everyone deserves the chance to fail or thrive. Correct me if I'm wrong. I probably butchered the exact language, but it was that idea. I really love that because you're right. I think everyone does deserve to take a chance on themselves like that. And it is, in a way, a privilege as well to have the choice of, well, I could invest into this one endeavor. That's my dream. And I might fail, but I also might not. And I think that is a really interesting way of framing things that I personally haven't thought of.
I would, if I may, like just to talk a little bit about meaningful
Yeah,
employment. It's really
please. Yeah.
important to me. I know a lot of vocational services like to stick us in what's called the five F's: food, filth, filing, flowers, and factories. So food would be like fast food, factories would be working in a factory, flowers is like landscaping, filing is administration work, and filth is janitorial. Those tend to be easy jobs to put people in, tend to be supportive, but I think it's really important when you're working on your vocational journey, you go for what's meaningful. I know a lot of people, a new current thing. When I was a kid, you were told you can't earn a living playing video games. How wrong they are. Look at all these streamers making a killing. And I know a lot of people who want to be content creators now. If that's your passion, I really suggest pursuing your passion and making the people working for you really live up to that meaningful employment they're supposed to be delivering. That being said, even your passions, you have to put some thought and consideration in because there's a lot of jobs out there that sound like it'd be fun, like playing video games for a living, until you realize that you're playing one video game for 8 hours a day consistently, 5 days a week, and then that video game's no fun, and you're doing it less for enjoyment and more for your audience because they want to see you suffer a little, and you
Mhm.
have to give that to them. If it's a passion and something you want to do, I would suggest pursuing it, but also making sure that it's a passion you'd be willing to give up if you become burnt out on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I used to work as it was an internship. It was my very first internship was working as a employment specialist at refugee and immigrant center where I live. And I remember I had like a list of clients that I was helping to get employment for each of them. And I remember talking to a lot of these clients, and they would tell me I was a doctor up until a few months ago, and I loved it. And I was working in government advocacy programs, and I loved it. And all I could offer them was a job at a warehouse, because their degrees unfortunately weren't recognized here. And it's heartbreaking. It was really challenging for me to have those conversations with them of, I'm sorry, you can't practice medicine here. You're going to have to go pack boxes all day. And I understand there's definitely different circumstances here that as a refugee rather than someone who is not a refugee, I guess. Of course, that
Mhm.
comes with its own set of challenges, but I think it is similar in that regardless of background, everyone deserves to have a meaningful employment, a job that they're passionate about or, have interest in. But yeah, that's just my experience working in a similar realm.
Mhm.
So I guess wrapping up here, I'd love to know what's your favorite tip for those who are looking to complete their college degree or looking for meaningful employment?
Definitely don't give in to the bare minimum. That if it's something you want to do, make sure you have the support and advocates behind you. Sills can help advocate for your needs. DVR, if your DVR person is not providing the support, look for maybe an outside person to, you know, give you that little oomph you need. Look at your colleges. Some of them have individual degree plans where you can use your life experience to test out of certain requirements or curriculum or design your own degree. I know when I was wrapping up my degree, I had a lot of people jealous that they wanted to have a degree in administrating high nonprofits for high risk use. It's exactly what they wanted to do. And they're like, wait, I can do that too? Like, I did it. Why not? So, go for what it is that you want and don't settle. I know a lot of us, for me, when I originally started with DVR, I wanted a job for the structure. I've never cared much about how much money I earned, but having a daily structure mattered to me. DVR said we can either get you employed or help you down what journey you want. And I chose journey, but I know there's life situations where money's pressing and you have to earn, but DVR should and help you find meaningful work. So go for what it is that you want, even if you have to go back later and say, "Okay, I hope you got a job. I appreciate it. I want to work towards the meaningful now and do what I want to do for the rest of my life." I'm a person that still struggles very much to this day. I have people who help make sure I take care of myself, and I've had a job that's incredibly supportive and understanding, but if I did it, I believe anyone can do it with the right supports. And there's a lot of people like myself out there whose job is to help you find those right supports. And we want to help. We want to make sure that all of us are contributing to the way that we want to.
Thank you, Ty. I think even just listening to the way you talk about it, I can tell you are so passionate and have nothing but the best intentions and truly want to help. So We appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story and some of those valuable educational pieces for everyone, letting listeners know what sorts of resources are out there, what types of programs are available to them. So thank you again for coming on.
Anytime. My pleasure.
If you would like to contact us, you can email us at staytuned@umassmed.edu and check out the Transitions ACR website at umassmed.edu/transitionsacr. Thanks for being here, and be sure to stay tuned for next time.